Today's episode is brought to you by MTD CNC, the go-to platform covering the latest stories in the world of manufacturing.
Hello, good afternoon. Good to be live here on LinkedIn and YouTube on this Friday afternoon. We've got, hopefully, and I'm sure it will be, a really interesting 45 minutes to an hour in front of us now on this live stream where we're going to be talking. Well, I'm with Lee Scott from Starrag to start with. Good afternoon, Lee.
Hello, Paul.
Back here again.
Back again.
I've got to say, having you here to do what we're about to do is really great because you've got a lot of knowledge in the industry and the sector, and you're very passionate about UK manufacturing as well, like I am, and like hopefully our audience. And I suppose that gives it away to a sense. We're going to be talking about UK manufacturing. We're going to be talking about some of the positive stories that have come about in recent weeks. And we're going to just talk generally about what they mean to you, the audience, what they mean to us, what they mean to Lee as part of the Starrag and Tornos group. And always, as we always say, really interested in your feedback because we're going to be talking about sectors such as the aerospace sector, the automotive sector, electric vehicles, defence, all of these things that at the moment, a lot of them are going through a lot of change and a lot of investment, which we'll touch on. Lee, looking at sort of the UK manufacturing sector, you were here with me. It might have even been a year ago now, maybe just under a year ago, where we were talking about where we were ranking in the league, the sort of global league of manufacturing nations. We've had a change of government since then, perhaps maybe, or that was about the time, so it was about a year ago. There has been a lot of positive stories happening. I mean, if we look at numbers, the UK's manufacturing sector generated 217 billion last year, supporting 2.6 million jobs. Now, I have to say at this point, a lot of the information we're going to be talking about here has come as a result of from working with Stuart Whitehead, who we all know and I'm sure you follow. He's always publishing news stories as they break on his page and MTD CNC's too. Lee, quite some statistic representing a big part of our GDP or a part of our GDP in this country. Leading on from where we sort of picked off or started a year or so ago, what are your thoughts behind these numbers now and where we're at as a nation?
Well, last time we spoke, we used a lot of data from, particularly from the MTA, not just about the value of the sector, but the contribution that we make, not just to our own engineering subdivision within the sector, but also to the wider economy. So manufacturing and engineering is key to the government's success and growth in the economy. And since the change of government, there is an industrial strategy now in place, which is great news for us all. And there is an awful lot of good news, whereas a year ago there were a few good news stories. Now there seems to be a lot of good news stories, particularly pushed out by Stuart, so thank you for sharing the good news. And I'd like to really drill into what that means to the precision machining manufacturing subsector of the overall manufacturing industry in the UK.
Yeah, because, I mean, some of these positive stories, I don't want to be a sceptic here, but the change of government, has that made a difference? Have these just come as a result of the ones we touch on shortly, a set of circumstances and things that have all happened at the right time in the right place almost?
Well, the government will tell you, yes, that's true, of course, but no, of course they've not. The foundations for many of these opportunities within the sector have been laid years ago. So, there's a lot of growth in the aerospace market, automotive markets, the battery gigafactories. You've got lots of different divisions with lots of new projects, but they haven't happened in the last few months. They've been started years ago.
Glad you agree. And that's a good place to start. Let's talk about some of these stories, Lee. Norton Motorcycles, they're to launch 6 new models. What does that mean for the UK? And what does it mean for that sort of, I suppose, the motorcycle sector? I mean, the first model is going to debut in November this year, I believe. And the production will take place at its 100 million Solihull HQ facility with a capacity of making 8,000 bikes per year. Now, okay, we all know what a motorbike looks like and a motorcycle looks like, but what sort of parts do you think would be made or could be made here, and how does that compare to maybe what your knowledge of is of that area of industry?
Well, my wife's dad used to ride a Norton motorcycle, so he'd be delighted that Norton's now a brand again. So you've got Norton, you've got Triumph at Hinckley, just down the road from where I live, of course. But motorcycles is small business in the UK, relatively compared to the automotive industry or the aerospace industry. But still, 8,000 bikes from Norton. I think there's 20,000 or so come out of Triumph. It's great. It's great to see the growth. What do they make? For us, I mean, Triumph used to have a manufacturing facility for making the engines in the UK. That went out to Thailand. I would imagine a lot of the parts are bought in from Norton and assembled at the Norton factory, like at the Triumph factory. I think for the UK manufacturing sector, the key is to find a way to be cost effective and to be
to get that back.
Yeah, to win it back.
So how is that going over there? I mean, surely the cost of, we talk about one of your machines, but we talk about these companies investing, building new facilities in some instances, investing in people. Are they investing in the machine tool technology in order to make the parts competitively? And if so, why are we not having those parts machined here? Why are they still being done elsewhere?
I think in those two cases, there's a challenge on volume. They're relatively low volume, so to set up a big new manufacturing facility just for a few motorcycle parts is probably not viable. But I do believe the UK can be competitive nowadays. You know, we lost a lot of work overseas in the last 2-3 decades. I think with the advances in machine tools and automation especially, there's a lot more opportunity to bring work back into the UK. There are disadvantages. You know, the labour cost is high. And the cost of electricity in the UK is ridiculously high compared to other countries. So, you know, we've got to overcome those disadvantages somehow.
Because I guess for a manufacturer, there's some of the variables they can't control really, which give them a disadvantage. So for them, they could be investing in some of the latest machine tool technology to reduce the manufacturing time, yet they're still climbing a very steep hill if they've got these other obstacles to overcome, aren't they?
They are, and the cost of power, for example, the government's already said that it will subsidise certain niche companies, if you like, steel producers, to try and make them more competitive by giving them reduced power costs. But that's got to be rolled out across the whole industry.
So government, if you're listening, that's a very big factor, and I think that probably rolls out in a lot of the stories that we're going to talk about. So if you're a Norton motorcycle enthusiast, that's good news potentially for you, and of course we'd love to hear from you and what you think about that investment in the Solihull HQ. Talking then, Lee, about EV technology, Estimo invests 100 million in UK EV tech. Now, this is a Japanese firm. They'll invest over 100 million in its Bolton plant to build a pioneering inverter production line for electric vehicles. This is expected to secure around 220 jobs and does mark the first of a facility of its kind here in the UK. This is a much bigger subject. This is a much bigger topic. I mean, these gigafactories now, Sunderland, 1,000 jobs, one in Bridgewater, 4,000 jobs. You know, what is this market, and you know, why are we reading and hearing a lot about it? Of course, it's electric vehicles, but if you look at an electric vehicle, there's 20 moving parts compared to 2,000 on a combustion engine. So kind of the manufacturing and the machining is going to be not a very big part of this, I would have thought. Would you agree? Sure.
I mean, the Estemo story is a small story in a big industry, and gigafactories as well are also an emerging story. That there's 3, 4, 5 or so new gigafactories, particularly up in Sunderland, down in Somerset, and then destined for the Midlands as well. However, if you look at gigafactories, you know, we're talking about 3, 4, maybe 5 in the UK. Europe, by the end of the decade, will be up at 38 to 40. So it needs to happen in the UK. It's a great story, but it's late already. So we've got to make this happen. The change from combustion engine to EV is happening quickly. You know, the infrastructure is starting to catch up. You can now find a plug-in power point if you need to charge your car, whereas 3-4 years ago people were queuing up. So we are catching up. You know, cars look the same from the outside, but of course the drivetrains are different, the power units are different. There's a lot less machined parts in an electrical system than there is in a combustion engine. So the industry's had to change. The dynamics in the industry have had to change in line with the design of the cars.
Because if you take, and we talk a lot about the European market, I go to Europe a lot, to Germany and other countries, and they've been hit hard by, you know, the EV, the increase in these vehicles. I mean, and clearly there's a case in point there, 2020 compared to 2,000 parts on a combustion engine. So you don't need as many machines to make those parts to make as many vehicles, do you?
Well, sure. Those companies that specialised in machines and production solutions specifically for automotive have had to completely change their models. They've had to diversify and go into other sectors because there simply won't be the volumes in the automotive industry for a combustion engine. And if they can't just flick over and manufacture the EV parts on the same platform, like you say, the ratio is lower, they're going to sell fewer machines. So it's interesting to see how they've started to move into other sectors like aerospace.
And what about Starrag themselves? Do you have, you know, is there parts that you're machining or would be machining in this area?
Well, sure. Things like the motors themselves that have replaced the combustion engine parts fit straight onto machining centres from Starrag. So that's a market we're involved in. We did have a really interesting one a couple of years ago. We were approached and we manufactured a big gantry machine solution for a company that's manufacturing the battery housings, so the aluminium battery housings, where we actually machine them, but we also friction stir weld them at the same time. So we're reducing the number of operations and doing welding and machining on the same machine. So again, that industry shift has created an opportunity for us in a sector that we don't generally deal in.
But what do you think it means when you look at what we're talking about here, UK manufacturing? I mean, very positive news about the jobs that are created, the investment here. Will a lot of this just be assembly then, do you think, in your mind? I mean, what is the processes that are going to happen in these factories? Because a lot of it's not going to be metal cutting, which we've established.
My concern sitting here as a representative to the machining sector is yes. You know, we've got a lot of great stories and we talk a lot about, well, it is assembly. You know, if we look at most factories in the UK, they're assembly factories with an element of machining, but most of those machine parts are bought in, and a lot of the percentage of those parts are bought in from offshore. So there's a big argument for reshoring those components, but there's a big argument for the OEMs to get much closer to the supply chains, to get the deals done, to become more competitive. A company can't be competitive unless it has an order with significant volume that it can invest in the automation required to bring the cost down. So,
of course,
it's a difficult problem to resolve.
What do you think? If you're watching us, which hopefully you are live on LinkedIn or on YouTube, we're live as we speak here with Lee Scott from Starrag. We're talking about UK manufacturing. We're talking about some of the positive stories that have come out over the last few weeks in various sectors. And we'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to hear what you think and what your experience is in UK manufacturing at the moment, whether you're working in some of these industries and sectors that we're talking about. It'd be great to leave a comment and we'll, of course, respond to that or potentially give you a shout out. We're going to move on to Audi F1 project expands into the UK motorsport hub. Sauber Motorsport has opened a new UK technology centre in Bicester, that M40 corridor that we all know for F1. Gosh, we're good in this sector, aren't we, when we look at our country? Good Lord. I mean, we are, you know, we must make the majority of parts for this sport, I would have thought.
Formula One's it's a global phenomenon, and everybody that likes racing likes Formula One. You know, it's exciting, it's sexy, it's fast, it's glamorous, it's got everything. And it's very well televised, and a lot of it happens in
all
the UK.
Like you.
That's right, yeah, of course.
Throwing you off your train of thought, but carry on, yeah.
Yeah, so you're right. You look at that the M40 corridor, as you describe it, there's a lot of companies that focus in Formula One, and there's a lot of Formula One happening in a very small area. And I'm less so nowadays involved in it, but I used to go and visit some of these companies, and you can feel the vibe when you come into the company. The guys that work in these factories, and girls, of course, they live for it. They eat.
I think you have to, don't you?
You do. Well, it's it's about taking a millisecond out of the next race, and it's about making parts for the following morning. It's not about.
Do you think these companies, and again, it'd be great to hear from people working in this sector, but do you think they feel part of the race team almost, because they're contributing to such a degree in some instances, aren't they, to success or failure?
Well, sure they do. I'm not going to mention names, but I've been into these companies where everybody goes into the canteen. It's not a canteen, it's a fancy restaurant, huge screen on the wall. They're all watching the races, there's champagne in the corners. It's living the dream.
Yeah. But why are we so good in this sector? I mean, is it down to, from what I hear and from what I used to see and still see, is that it's all about response times, isn't it? It's all about, potentially lower volumes, work that needs to get out the door very quickly, a phone call at night needs to be done the next morning in season.
Well, we're as a nation, if you look at the UK, take the Industrial Revolution, we're very, very innovative. We're thinkers, we're good designers, we make things happen. With Formula One, it's about speed, it's about developing that process, it's about being able to make it, to get it on that car for the next race and make that car even faster. So we're incredibly good at Formula One. We were incredibly good for the ventilator challenge in COVID. A solution was required. Companies got together. They all worked together. They produced the ventilators in record times. It was like a Formula One race. So we seem to be very good at that, less so about winning long-term contracts where we make money for 20, 30 years.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it is certainly something we should be very proud of here in the UK, what we have in the motorsport sector. Lee, let's move on to the defence sector, because investment in this was worth 53.9 billion in 23-24, increased to 59.8 billion in 25-26. The investment into the defence sector, or what it's worth, and we've got to increase to 2.5% by 2027, and the figures I mentioned there was about 2.4%. So the 2.5% is obviously in relation to the NATO requirements and so forth, and this is going to be good for two things. It's going to be good for the defence of our waters and our land, but also for the manufacturing sector. And we've seen this already in a few things. BAE opens a gigantic shipbuilding hall in Glasgow, and that's part of a 300 million investment. You've got Babcock as well. I mean, everybody knows Babcock. We've also got the UK expands submarine fleet to 12 vessels. This is the AUKUS programme. So much happening in this area, isn't it? What does it just summarise what that, in your mind, when you look at defence, what's involved within it for UK manufacturers and for this, the metal cutting that we talk about?
Well, there's a number of different answers to that question. I mean, defence for me, from a manufacturing, certainly precision engineering perspective, involves submarines, it involves ships, it involves air, so defence aircraft, could be land vehicles, could be weapon systems. So there's a huge spectrum of manufactured components from different materials for the defence industry. And I think in many cases, those parts can't be bought in. It's our defence industry. We have to make those parts in the UK, and I'm hoping that's the strategy that the government's going to adopt. You mentioned that the submarine programme. The big news is the AUKUS programme. So, UK, US, Australia, UK, USA. So it's a tri-party product based from a UK design. And as you say, 12 new AUKUS submarines to be in service by the end of the 2030s.
I mean, it doesn't sound a lot, does it? But 12, but it is. I know it is. I'm just thinking from an outsider looking in, might it's going to be 12 submarines. 12, is that a lot? And I mean, how long is it going to take to make these 12? When would they be in service?
Well, building a submarine is not like building it's not like the ventilator challenge. It's not going to happen in months. So I don't know the answers to those questions. But once the design is frozen, once the work share is agreed between the three regions, then it's a case of acquiring the land, building the facilities, equipping them, building the subsectors,
do you think that would be done
assembling.
here?
Some of it, I'm sure, will be done here. Some of it will be done in Australia. Some of it will be done in America. Hence the tri-party agreement. But exactly what, I don't know.
But how long do you think, would you say, it would be until one of these was potentially built? Because this always amazes me with some of these manufacturing projects. You hear about them, and then suddenly you hear that, you might hear about HS2, or you might hear about another project, and we're talking, 2030, 2035, 2040. These things can be a very, very long way away. Would this be the case with this?
Firstly, I hope this is more successful than HS2.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can read this on the internet. The delivery schedule is late 2030s, provided there's no slippage. So this is not an overnight project, but this is a huge opportunity for three countries to share the work out and manufacture parts accordingly.
And for you as a business, for Starrag, I mean, I suppose this fits in perfectly with some of the products offered within your portfolio, doesn't it? When you talk about submarine, big, larger components on submarines, right the way down to maybe potentially some of the smaller parts too.
Sure. Well, we have a subdivision within Starrag called LPMS, Large Parts Machining Systems. So within that sector of our business, we fit straight into the sectors of the large shipbuilding, as you mentioned earlier, large submarines. So sure, there's a lot of components on these large defence programmes, whether they be air, whether they be sea, that fit into the Starrag portfolio, particularly German manufactured out of the Bielefeld plant.
Which we've been to, and which we'll be going again. So if you have just tuned in, we're here live on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We're talking about UK manufacturing, some of the positive stories that have come out on the news over recent weeks. Would love you to get involved. Please feel free to comment. Let us know what you think. If you're working in either the automotive or the aerospace sector, or in fact, we're going to be talking about yellow goods, medtech, and let's actually touch on aerospace here, Lee. I want to go back to a story. Rolls-Royce lands a multi-billion pound jet engine deals. Now, this came at the Paris Air Show, which, in fact, we spoke about on one of our podcasts. About how good it was for us, for the UK there. I think on the pavilion we had about 60 companies or something, I believe. This is big news, isn't it?
It's big news, and there was lots of big news at Paris, as there's lots of big news at all air shows. So I'm sure people don't suddenly decide at an air show they're going to buy 20 aircraft, but obviously those handshakes are saved and announced at the show. I did
hear that there was quite a big impact on the Boeing Airbus, on the Boeing side, because of what had happened in the Air India disaster a few weeks before. I think there was some people that were going to attend that didn't for the reasons that you can probably imagine, which gave obviously Airbus a distinct advantage at that event. But that's a side issue. But from a Rolls-Royce perspective, it was an exciting event by the sounds of it.
Rolls-Royce did extremely well, and I mean Rolls-Royce's share price is rocketing at the moment as a business. They're doing extremely well. On top of that, Pratt & Whitney and GE also announced large aero engine contracts at Paris, as did Airbus and Embraer, and also Safran Helicopters. So there was an awful lot of really positive news coming out of Paris.
And what does this mean then? What does this mean for you, for Starrag, for UK manufacturing, for machinists around the country? Secured orders for over 140 Trent engines from airlines, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Egypt and Taiwan. I mean, what does this mean for us as a country and for you?
Well, every one of those engines hangs on an aircraft wing. So if you times that by, if you times the engines by how many aircraft you require, and you look at also the Pratt & Whitney and the GE orders, the industry is skyrocketing. So for us, globally, it's a matter of engaging with those OEMs and supporting those OEMs to reach rate, because monthly build rates are set to increase. Now that involves a lot of different things: machining, assembly, treatments, everything else. You've also got military, so the military programs are also increasing in line with the defence increases, particularly in Europe, but elsewhere in the world as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for us as a business, both in soft metal machining, hard metal machining, and also composite machining across the aircraft industry for civils, military, and also, of course, engines.
And when we talk about assembly here in the UK rather than machining, would you say that's not necessarily the case when it comes to engine parts like this, or would that be similar?
To be controversial, I'm going to say there isn't enough business in the UK still. There's some great companies in the UK manufacturing aircraft parts, without a doubt. It's a big industry for us. But when you look at the ratio of parts manufactured in the UK versus the ratio of parts bought in from overseas, there's still an awful lot of component manufacture in the Far East that I believe UK companies could competitively manufacture today, whereas 20 years ago maybe we weren't competitive and that's why we lost it. But there's no reason why we should be more expensive today.
I want to hold that point because, again, I'd love to hear from people in the audience listening to this. We're live here on LinkedIn and YouTube with Lee Scott from Starrag. We're talking about UK manufacturing. We're talking about some of the good, positive stories that are happening around the industry at the moment. We're currently on talking about Rolls-Royce and the fact that they landed a multi-billion-pound jet engine deals at the recent Paris Air Show. If you're involved in the aerospace sector, I'd love to hear from you. Are we in good times at the moment? This is obviously positive news for you. What are your thoughts around the industry? Is it becoming more difficult, more challenging? Are you having to be more competitive? You mentioned there, Lee, about the fact that it should be good for us, but what's your answer to those things for manufacturers here in this country that want to get involved in this sector, or are? Is it difficult? Are the challenges that they're going to be facing that you think that potentially your plant could help them with?
Well, there are political challenges in the aerospace industry. There's the industrial participation or offset deals that go on. So if you buy a certain value of aircraft, your country is then given that value in terms of work. So emerging companies, especially who are buying aircraft, are getting lots of work, lots of manufactured parts, that sort of thing. It's our business to make sure that we win what's left. We with the advances in automation, with the advances in machine tools now, the cost per part can be as effective. It can be the same from the UK as it can be from a low-cost economy. So we have to get out there and we have to show how competitive we can be. But also the government has to step in, make sure we get our fair share of offset or more.
And do we? I mean, how's that? How do you see that? You mentioned there, and we did talk about this in a previous podcast, about other countries benefiting from these offset programs to quite a huge degree. How's that for us?
Well, contractually we must do. I'm guessing, but in terms of where we rank, I remember when I was a young engineer, if you like, just come out of my apprenticeship. We were second in the world as an aircraft manufacturer, only to the US. The French may argue with that, but we were up there. We've slipped down the rankings significantly. So it's in our interest now, not just to build aircraft, but to manufacture the parts for their aircraft in the UK. And there's no reason why we can't. Why ship something halfway across the world when it can be made just down the road?
Yeah, I mean, some of these projects backwards and forwards from country to country. Just briefly, Lee, what does the offset program mean for those that might be watching and listening and going, well, how does that work? I know you briefly touched on it, but could you elaborate?
Really simply, it's a reciprocal trade agreement. So if you're a country and you spend 100 million with Boeing or Airbus, say, often there's a reciprocal trade agreement where your country will get 100 million's worth of business.
So I'm going to go to Boeing, I'm going to buy 50 aircraft, but in return what I want them to do is give me so much of their manufacturing into my community in
Sure,
order to.
and it's not law and it's not exclusive. It's just it's a trade agreement that's done. That doesn't mean we have less of an opportunity. We still have as much opportunity to win business as anybody else, and we're much more competitive than we were.
And are you excited about the aerospace sector?
Very.
If we've talked, and again, just say we're here live on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're talking about UK manufacturing, and with Lee Scott from Starrag, we're going into a bit of detail about some of the good news stories that are out there at the moment. Lee, aerospace, you're positive about this at the moment. It is good times. I mean, we went through the COVID dip and all of that, and now we're really coming out of the other side of that, aren't we?
We are, and I think for the UK manufacturing sector, the aerospace market is a really key market for us. It's what we're good at, and we should win more business. Good. Positive news on that, and we'd love to hear from you. As I say, if you are watching this, please feel free to comment and let us know your thoughts on what you feel about UK manufacturing at the moment. Do the government need to be doing more? We say they do, lots and lots more, although we're talking about some really positive things that are happening. We've said ourselves on the start of this podcast that actually we think that's come as a result of circumstances rather than government intervention. So what do you think? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you either on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Lee, the SMR programme, talking about Rolls-Royce again, they've been chosen to build the UK's first modular nuclear reactors. Now, what is that to start with? Back to basics. Back to basics. An SMR is a small modular reactor. So, if you look at a new power station like the one that we're just building in the UK down at Hinkley Point, that has a single large reactor. What an SMR power station looks like is it has a series of small modular reactors connected together, if you like, to give you the same output as a single large reactor. So if one fails, for example, you can just take one out of action and the rest give you power. The big advantage really for us is that the small modular reactors can be built in a factory and they can be sent on a lorry or a train down to a power station. So they could run a small power station, for example, instead of these large mega stations. They also can be exported. So there's a lot of activity around the world at the moment on small modular reactors, and there are different players around. But it's great that Rolls-Royce have finally, and I'm saying finally because it's taken many years for the government to decide that, yeah, we're going forwards with Rolls-Royce.
They're apparently a couple of years ahead when it comes to the innovation and the development of this, aren't they, compared to their nearest competitor? But when did it all start? Because you were telling me that, you've been hearing about this for a decade.
Well, Starrag was involved and on the board of the nuclear AMRC, it's probably 12, 13 years ago now. So I've been sat in their board meetings, if you like, for a decade, hearing the same story year after year after year on small modular reactors. Then suddenly a couple of years ago, started to hot up a bit. There were competitions in place for the last few years to down select from half a dozen contenders. And of course, they've finally decided on Rolls-Royce, but several years too late.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't they anyway? Do you know what I mean?
Why wouldn't they anyway? British company, why wouldn't you? Why would you go with somebody else? So it was the obvious choice. It was the right choice. The downside is the delivery milestones haven't really changed. Whilst the UK was dithering around, the Czech Republic committed and signed up with Rolls-Royce, and the CZ Czech company is a shareholder in the new Rolls-Royce SMR company. That's how close they are with the Czech Republic. So the Czech will be first. We will for sure have a number of SMR power stations in the UK, and hopefully Rolls-Royce will be successful to export these around the world as well.
Okay, so where are these going to be made then, do you think?
Well,
you talk about the Czech Republic and, I'm sure they're rubbing their hands together, and they made a good decision, clearly.
Let's get political again on this one then. If this decision had been made 5 years ago, for sure there'd be a factory in the UK manufacturing these SMR units already. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So where will they be made? Good question. If anybody out there knows, I don't know. I know where they were going to be made, but whether we'll actually get the business in the UK or whether we'll just be assembling and testing in the UK, only time will tell. So this is where we need to be very careful when we say made in the UK.
But is it the future though? These, because you look at a power station. I heard somewhere it can take up to 10 years to build a nuclear power station. Yet these are and these can be moved around, and they've got a great output on them. Apparently, I don't know the technical detail, but and are they safe?
Of course they're safe. Yeah, of course they're safe. I mean, the whole nuclear industry is super safe and moves at a very, very slow pace. But the government have already announced a copy paste of Hinkley Point, if you like, over in Somerset. Sorry, not in Somerset, on the east coast at Sizewell. So there'll be a Sizewell C reactor, which will be an EDF reactor, the same as down at Hinkley Point in Somerset. There will be SMR facilities, power stations in other regions of the UK. I don't know exactly where they'll be. So it'll be a mix between the two.
Well, let's hope a lot of that manufacturing, not just assembling, machining of parts, does happen here. I mean, on the renewables front as well, when you look at some of the, I mean, that's obviously a massively growing sector as well, isn't it? Are you involved in that? Are you seeing a lot of opportunity there for us here in the domestic market?
No, we're involved in it in a huge way. And in fact, we've got, in China alone, we've got a machine shop with 100 Starrag machines in it, making parts for wind. So, a lot of people say that China's the biggest producer of greenhouse gases. They maybe they are, but they're also the biggest and the fastest growing region in terms of solar power, wind power, all the other.
So they would argue
green
that
energy,
all the goods outweighing the bad.
It depends what you read and where you read it. But in the UK, we're surrounded by water. If you go on an aeroplane, first thing you see as you're flying over the coast is loads of wind farms. We make virtually nothing in the UK. It's a travesty. So this is why we must be successful with SMR.
Yeah, but again, for anybody from a government perspective, we should be involved in manufacturing. I mean, some of your larger machinery must be being installed all over Europe and in Scandinavia, machining parts that we're seeing in the North Sea that we could be doing here.
Sure. Well, we did a movie in Bielefeld, and you stood on a machine with a 10-metre tail.
Was that what that was being?
That will make large bearings and large housings for these very, very high-powered large wind turbines, and they're in Denmark. They're not in the UK.
So for people of influence listening, we want that work here. We want companies to benefit from that, which obviously has the knock-on effect for companies like Lee's, supplying the equipment in order to be able to machine them. Yellow goods and agriculture, some good news in these areas as well.
Well, again, it's growth. I mean, you look at companies like JCB, extremely successful company. You've got other yellow goods, agricultural manufacturers in the UK. Tractors as well, tractors made down in Basingstoke. Unfortunately, again, most of it is assembly. Most of the precision machine parts are assembly. There are machine shops around. I'm not saying there's not, but a lot of the parts are brought into the UK. So again, it brings this reshoring topic to the front again.
And medtech. Now, you guys are pretty big in this, and I know, having gone to Ireland on a few occasions, so is that market, isn't it?
It is, and again, for the UK and Ireland, it is predominantly, or the larger companies are predominantly based in Southern Ireland. Some great technology in medtech, very, very high precision machined, high quality machined parts. I mean, you wouldn't want anything less inside your body, would you?
No.
But there's also a lot of other companies, small subcontractors in the UK as well. So we see medtech as a key sector, both with Starrag and Tornos products. Again, small parts, but super precise parts. So anything that's precision is good for us.
Yeah, when you look in the, when you watch, and I do, sadly, some of these programs where, people are being operated on having, critical illnesses and what have you, you look at some of the robotics and all of this, the research, the development, all of that that's gone into that is just absolutely mind-blowing, isn't it? So you can't imagine that sector's going to continue to grow. And obviously there's a great relationship between the US and Ireland, isn't there, which I'm sure is a big supporter of that area. But as I say, Lee, it's been great to talk about some of these stories. We've been live here on LinkedIn and YouTube for about the last 40 minutes, maybe a bit more. You can obviously go back and watch this, and I'd encourage you to do so. We've talked about some really positive things that are happening in our sector at the moment across different industries. Lee, a few words to summarise. Compared to where we were and where we are at the moment, it's definitely some good things happening.
I think there are. Now, I think there's a lot of really positive OEM investment in the UK across different sectors. If I'm going to be really selfish and talk about the precision machining sector, the challenge now is to ensure that we manufacture the parts in the UK. So for things like energy, as you've just said, wind energy, SMR, the defence market especially, but also automotive with the EVs, medtech, we don't make enough in the UK, for me, in the precision machining sector, and the government has to help us to move forwards with this.
And if you take some of these stories and the investment in jobs and facilities and will be technologies, if it was that we managed to just get, a few percent, or a certain 20%, 25, 30% of them machined here, whatever it might be, it would make a significant difference, a massive difference to our industry, wouldn't it?
Well, not only that, Paul, it makes a massive difference to our industry, but every high-paid engineering job in the UK also feeds additional money into the UK general economy. So the government's support for our sector will pay big dividends for them over the long term.
Yes, great. Government, I hope you're watching and listening, or listening, I should say. Yeah, Lee, fantastic to have you here with me today. I've really enjoyed it, and always do, talking about UK manufacturing with you. Of course, to summarise, Lee is from Starrag, the Starrag Group, and for all of the industries that we talk about here, Lee has machinery and equipment, and more importantly, solutions that can help you manufacture parts for these sectors. Lee, it's been a pleasure to host you.
Thanks you very much.
Thank you for listening. If you want to find out more about what's happening in the world of manufacturing and engineering, visit mtdcnc.com.